This is Professor Bill Herman coming back at you with another lecture as part of Business 1950 Business Communication. This is the second of two lectures that I will be presenting on Chapter 1. This one will focus on the various media of communication. Now, in this presentation today, I want to talk about the different communication media, but I just want to bring in some new points about each. The book covers a lot of what I would have said. I just want to highlight some additional points. These could include norms for the medium, which medium is great for which circumstances or terrible for which circumstances, etc. Just some stuff that the book has not covered. Before I get started on the specifics, I wanted to include an old-time printing press here to highlight how important a change in medium can be. Now, in history class, you may have learned about the radical changes brought about by the invention of the printing press. Previously, access to the Bible was highly restricted. Ditto political philosophy, the law, everything. Any book that was copied by hand, which meant that there weren't that many copies of any books floating around. But with the invention of the printing press, copies of books became much less expensive. This led to revolutions in theology and religion, completely upended a lot of the political economic order. It utterly reshaped world history. And just this one change of medium led to all of those changes. And so I just want to highlight that because as we move from one medium to another, the effects can be hard to overstate sometimes. The first medium I want to talk about today is print. Now, the book talks in some detail about print flyers, in particular being of continuing use to businesses, and I think that that's the case. Many of you are young enough, in fact, most of you are young enough, that you probably have a low esteem for the value that something like a paper flyer or a print mailer showing up in the mail can have for people. But keep in mind that your age range is relatively unique in having grown up without print having a pretty central role as a means of communicating between people across distances. So for those folks who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and up, print can really have a much more important role in their lives because they grew up in a different era and have a different relationship with the written word, having come on paper before digital devices were ubiquitous. But I want to make one additional note about print, which is just in terms of pen and paper notes when you're in meetings. Now, when you go into meetings in the workplace, I strongly recommend that you either take notes on pen and paper or that you get a tablet or other computer with a stylus that supports that experience. It's hard to overstate the comparative value of writing out notes by hand versus typing them. Study after study shows that we learn more by writing something out by hand. Now, this is largely because of the reduced capacity to write down everything. As most people, you can probably type faster than you can write by hand, and that's good. That's an important skill to be able to type very quickly, but that means that we can type at a rate that's close enough to transcription that when we type to take notes, we tend to get closer to transcribing everything, which means that we're not really thinking about what's really important here. Whereas when you take notes by hand, you have to focus on what are the main points here, what's really important, what are the essential items that I need to take away with me. And when we do that, by virtue of a medium that forces us to slow down a little bit how much we can transcribe, we actually learn a lot more. An additional benefit of taking notes by hand in meetings is that it convinces those of us who are older, and even supervisors of your own age range, that you are paying attention. And that is a message that you definitely want to communicate in the workplace, that you are paying attention. So taking notes by pen and paper or by stylus and digital paper equivalent is, in my view, a really important skill and habit I would take into the workplace. Now, the book flies by oral communication in part because a lot of it is covered later. The book, as well as the additional reading that I've posted, will post, covers oral communication in the form of presentations in a lot of detail. But I think even given that it discusses this later in some detail, I think it gives oral communication short shrift. I think oral communication is much more important than we give it credit for. Oral communication is best for informal communication. It's best for building personal rapport, dealing with delicate subjects, as well as off the record communication. If you need to have a conversation with someone to say, listen, I don't want this part of your personnel file, or I don't want a part of my personnel file, but could we please give or receive some feedback? Oral communication is absolutely going to be the best and most important way to do that. And also, just look at these two gentlemen in this photograph. They may or may not like each other. They may or may not know each other up until this point. But clearly, just from the picture, you can just see how much better they're really understanding each other, because they have access to all of that nonverbal communication that comes in a face-to-face oral communication setting. Now, Zoom notwithstanding, this is a big part of what's been really hard about the pandemic, is that we are missing this oral communication, the richness of oral communication that happens when it's truly face-to-face. Now, additionally, I just want to highlight thinking about presentations versus other media. A great presentation done well for a live audience is absolutely magical. It's almost impossible to overstate how much that shapes the way that people think about something, or the relationship that people want to have with the speaker or with the speaker's organization. And even a competent presentation, not only a great presentation, obviously a great presentation is fantastic, but even if you can just get to the point where you are a competent public speaker or a competent presenter, in my view, that's worth 100 glossy brochures, and it's worth 1,000 emails in terms of what that does for your business. So we're going to emphasize that later in the semester, because that's an important skill. Even if we're going to be doing it via remote recordings this semester, that's still something that is absolutely an essential part of business communication that I want you to work toward this semester. Now, email is a medium that you should all have some pretty good familiarity with this point, but email comes with an important caveat, and I think this picture really highlights that. If you can't quite make out what's going on in this slightly pixelated photo here, the Mail app on this person's Mac computer says 1,652 unread messages. Now, that's an impressively high number of unread email messages, but this person is not alone in having a substantial number of unread email messages right in their inbox at any given point in time. So email is great if you know that the other person reads your emails. But if you don't know that that person specifically reads emails from you specifically, then email is in some ways throwing flyers at people versus just handing them to them, and even worse, throwing flyers in a crowded square on a windy day. A lot of it, if not most of it, is just going to be lost, especially if you're trying to send commercial messages, advertisements, etc. via email. Good luck. It's very hard getting through that way. Email, however, is great if you need proof that you sent a message, regardless of whether it was read. So that's why when privacy policies in the EU changed a few years ago, everybody you've ever done business with sent you a privacy policy update via email, because they needed proof that they had sent you that message, but they didn't really care if you had read it. And so they just emailed it to you, check that box off, and then they can move along. Now, phone and voicemail is a source of real consternation for a lot of people, especially younger people. That's why I found a picture of a young person sitting here holding her head in consternation. Now, I don't know if it's because she's about to make a phone call or might have to leave a voicemail for someone, but I know for a fact that the younger folks are, the more likely you are to have a lot of anxiety about making a traditional phone call, because it's just not done. It's not that common anymore. You'll text your friends endlessly or message them on social media, and only occasionally have a phone call. And I myself have started to make this transition as well. I sometimes feel rude calling people out of the blue unless I know them well enough to know that they're open to that. even though, some people give me their phone number, right? I have thousands and thousands of folks who have emailed me with a phone number in their email signature, but I will often feel like I can't just pick up the phone and call them unless something is really urgent or important. Now that change of norms is important to recognize and honor, but there's something important here about this situation, which is that you just have to get over this anxiety. You just have to get over this anxiety in the professional workplace, and you have to learn how to make a good phone call and how to be comfortable doing so. Now, if you're like my son, who's it still has a couple years of high school to go, but is a lot closer to your age for most of you than I am to the age for most of you. And if you're at all like him, where the prospect of picking up the phone and making a standard phone call is absolutely terrifying, get over this before you get your first professional position, or if you're already in a professional position, before you look for your next professional position, because it's just an absolutely crucial skill. Phone calls are incredibly important, especially as a way to reach the over 40 crowd. I try to keep up with my emails, certainly from students. That's an absolute top priority for me. So I'm going to try my very best to get back to you within a business day for any email you send me. But if it starts to get too long and I'm having trouble explaining what's going on in an efficient way, or worried about needing some more rapid fire back and forth communication, I'm just going to say, can we talk about this by phone? Because as somebody who's a little older and is comfortable on the phone, I'm going to demand that from you for to help resolve some issues. So get used to making phone calls. That's going to be an expectation in the workplace, and even among folks where folks on both sides of the line are maybe not so comfortable on the phone making those calls, which, by the way, is a concern that extends in across all age ranges as well. It just is more common among younger folks. But even if both people on the line are like, I'd rather not be on the phone, it's important for you both to be able to have a phone call anyway, because sometimes it's just more efficient, and it's certainly a much better way to reach people than email in a great number of cases. Instant messaging is becoming increasingly common in the workplace. Now, by this, I don't mean Facebook instant messaging in most workplaces. A few workplaces used GChat because it's free, but most workplaces will have something like Slack or Microsoft Teams. You'll have to use whatever your office uses. But something work-focused is generally preferred. If you're setting up a small business, don't set it up on Facebook. That's a huge distraction for people. Set up something in like Teams or Slack or a platform that is more work-focused and where you can keep work at work. MSU Denver uses Teams for this purpose, and I'm really starting to dig it. I'm getting into using Teams to just quickly ping someone. It's a lot more efficient than email. You can see, hey, are you there? You can chat back and forth. If you want to jump into a voice or video call, you can do that right within the application. And that feature, all of those features tend to be built right into all of these different professionally focused instant messaging applications. Now, if you're in finance, you may wind up in a shop that uses Symphony. You may wind up in a shop that uses Bloomberg terminals. In other words, there are a lot of more focused or niche applications here as well that you may have to get used to, and you'll just have to figure out, for every workplace you're in, you'll have to figure out what are we using here, and then how do I get good at this, and what are the norms about, how often can I ping people, whether it's people below you, people at your level, people above you, that sort of thing. And you want to make sure within however the instant messaging culture is happening at that workplace that you're falling into that groove with everyone else. Now, there are a couple additional words I want to say about instant messaging that are hard to overstate, which is that while it's good for informal conversations, informal does not equal off the record. Informal and off the record are different things. If you have written communication with someone, that written communication is recorded, that digital communication is being recorded, and it can be discovered by attorneys during a lawsuit. So if you want an off-the-record conversation, make a phone call, or even better, find that person and talk to them in person. Let's have lunch, let's get coffee, can I swing by your office? I'd like to chat. That's much better for anything where you want it fully off the record, because Slack, Teams, they're informal. Hey, great, what's going on? How was your weekend? It can be fully appropriate in that medium depending on the workplace, but Never say anything that you wouldn't want to come out in a lawsuit and that you wouldn't want to come out in the media, because it's all actually on the record. Now, social media, it can be great, but the very short version here is to approach it cautiously. I've pulled up a great example of a tweet that went very, very, very badly from Chase Bank. This is the official Twitter account for Chase, and it says, why is my balance so low? Bank account, make coffee at home. Bank account, eat the food that's already in the fridge. Bank account, you don't need a cab, it's only 3 blocks. I guess we'll never know. Bank account, seriously? Hashtag Monday Motivation. Max Totsky for Inc.com, and I've got the link to the article in the slide notes here. Max Totsky writes, there's something inherently icky about a bank smugly berating people for their financial instability, particularly one, meaning particularly a bank, that received a bailout from U.S. taxpayers during the 2008 financial crisis. When Chase implied that certain customers have a low balance because of their own bad spending habits, the backlash was swift and justified. In other words, social media can be powerful. It can be an excellent way to reach people. As the pandemic was starting to take hold, Steakum, of all companies, the company that makes sliced meat that's really good for a Philadelphia cheesesteak, a Philly cheesesteak, that company started tweeting all sorts of really good and well thought out scientific information from some, graduate degree holding person in the PR department who thought that it was a great opportunity to get Steakum's name in the news by just being a good source of reliable scientific information, and it works splendidly. So it's not the case that all social media is bad or dangerous or will harm the company's brand, but that you should be really cautious about how you use social media. And most companies are very cautious about how they use social media for good reason, because you don't want to be the equivalent of Chase Bank in this scenario. And if you want to see more examples, or you just want a good laugh, I recommend you use your internet search engine of choice to look up something to the effect of social media fails or embarrassing social media, corporate social media fails, and the lists are endless, and there's some overlap. It's just that the number of examples of bad social media that are out there is hard to overstate. So if you want to chuckle at other people's expense, I think it's, given that we're talking about major global corporations, I think it's kind of a fun and really valid way to spend a couple minutes and learn a couple things about what not to do with social media. So that's all I wanted to say about these various media across, how to choose between them, or some of the strengths and weaknesses of each. The book covers the rest of it in I think good enough detail of what else I would have liked to say. And the book also has a lot of other good stuff in this chapter, so read it closely. I in particular value the discussion of ethics. I think that is, for such a very brief discussion of ethics, I found it really valuable in the book. And I'm teaching Global Corporate Social Responsibility and Sustainability Business 3040, which is our business ethics class at MSU Denver. So I think given that they only had just a few pages to do that, they did really well. And then the exercises at the back of the chapter are also pretty valuable. So make use of the rest of that. But I thought that what I've highlighted here were some items that were particularly worth drawing out. And I look forward to talking with you a little bit more about Chapter 2.